Hi, my name is Sam, and this is Laverne. And we're part of the paleontology team at the University of Nebraska State Museum. One of the things I love about being a paleontologist is that we get to go outside and collect the fossils. The fossils that you see at Laurel Hall, those all came from places in Nebraska. Where I am right now is in the very northern side of Nebraska, northeastern Nebraska, along the Missouri River. Here, the Missouri River cuts down through rock layers that have been dated to the same time as the dinosaurs. So we can take a close look at those rocks and see what they can tell us about the environment in Nebraska during that time. So let's take a look at the rock up close. You can see that it's pretty soft. It breaks up pretty easily. One of the tools that a geologist might use is a little bit of a weak acid, because some rocks will react with that acid. And I don't happen to have any with me today, but you could do this test with something like vinegar. This rock will react with dilute acid. And so that's a major clue that this rock is something called limestone. It's a rock that's made up of millions and millions and millions of microscopic skeletons living in an ocean environment, and their skeletons raining down on the seafloor to become sediment that covers the seafloor. That eventually becomes limestone, and that's what we see here. So we have this clue that this rock formed in an ocean environment just from the rock type. So let's see if we can find some other clues. Hey guys, I seen you guys poking around here. What have you been finding?
We've been finding all kinds of these rocks like this.
Oh yeah, these are cool. So what do you have over here? Yeah, these are little bits of clamshell. This fossil is of a chimney oyster. These are all oysters that a lot of times would grow on the top of these clamshells. So cool, good stuff. We find shark teeth even. They're a little trickier to find. Anyway, I'll leave you guys be, but keep your eyes peeled for shark teeth. Have a good night. More lines of evidence that these rocks formed in an ocean environment. From our outcrop of rock layers along the Missouri River, let's step back and look at the bigger picture geology of Nebraska. On a map of geology, usually there are different colors that show different types of rocks and different ages of rocks that are exposed near the Earth's surface. In Nebraska, most of the rocks are formed as layers of sedimentary rock, and we can use the sequence of those layers to tell us about the different ages of those layers. So you can think of these different colors as being stacked on top of one another in Nebraska. And to help us visualize that, let's imagine our laundry basket at home, and let's think about what had to happen to make this stack of different layers of clothes. So let's say maybe on Monday you had baseball practice and you wore your blue baseball jersey. That baseball jersey goes in the bottom of the empty laundry basket. On Tuesday, maybe you wore a green t-shirt. So at the end of the day, that goes on top of the baseball clothes. Maybe on Wednesday, you wore a yellow sweatshirt. And at the end of the day, that goes on the top of the stack. So we can think of these different groups of clothes as layers in our basket, and we can say the blue ones from the bottom, it formed first, it's the oldest, and the yellow sweatshirt, that was the last thing you wore on Wednesday, and so that's the youngest. It's on the top of the stack. Rock layers are the same sort of deal, where on the bottom we have the older layers, on the top we have the younger layers. With rock layers, a lot of times we can say what type of environment that rock formed in. The laundry basket example too. On Monday, the weather was probably warm, or at least it wasn't rainy. You had baseball practice that day. Maybe on Tuesday, the environment was also warm because you wore a t-shirt. But on Wednesday, the weather was colder because you wore a sweatshirt that day. We have the sequence of layers, older on the bottom, younger on the top. We also have a record of what the environment was like during those days. This chart on the right is a picture of the different names of rock layers in Nebraska. What I'd like you to pay attention to are the colors. We have older layers here that are shown in blue, younger layers above that in green, and the youngest layers in yellow. Now in our laundry basket, if we wanted to see some of the older layers on the bottom, we'd have to dig through the pile. In the same sort of way, if we wanted to see older layers of rock in Nebraska, we'd have to dig through the younger layers. This stack of layers from Nebraska is thousands of feet thick. So it would be a lot of digging to dig through all those layers. So usually geologists and paleontologists look for places where rivers or other earth processes have dug down through those layers for us. And if we come back to our map of Nebraska, on the east side of the state, rivers and glaciers have carved down through those rocks. So today I'd like to focus on the green colors on this map and on this chart on the right. Those rocks are between about 70 million and 100 million years old, from part of the age of dinosaurs. That outcrop up along the Missouri River, that's shown right here by this red star, and its position in the stack of layers is shown right here. Remember, there were clues that told us that those rocks probably formed in an ocean environment. So to help us imagine what different parts of an ocean environment might look like, let's look at this picture from space of the Mississippi River right where it empties into the Gulf of Mexico. The Mississippi River carries sediment. It carries sand and mud. And when it hits the ocean, it drops that sediment, and that's what's happening in this picture. The sand-sized pieces, they fall out first, and then they get swept along the shore by waves. So we would call that a beach environment. The mud-sized pieces, they get carried out further into the ocean, but they eventually settle out. So here where the mud is settling out, maybe we'll call that a shallow ocean environment. Farther out into the ocean, the sediment out there is not made of sand or mud. It's made up of microscopic skeletons of plankton that lived in a deep ocean environment. After the animals die, they settle down to the seafloor to make a rock like limestone, like we saw along the Missouri River. So let's compare our outcrop along the Missouri up here to a couple other places. We'll look a little further west. Right over here is a place where the Niobrara River has cut down through the yellow to expose some of the green layers. Down southeast near Lincoln, where rivers and glaciers and even people have dug down to let us see those layers. Near Lincoln is a place called Robbers Cave, and it's a series of tunnels that have been dug through the Dakota sandstone. That rock layer is about 95 million years old. We can tell from those sand pieces and the layers that make up the Dakota sandstone that it probably formed near a beach environment. Our outcrop along the Missouri River, those were limestone. Remember, that probably forms in a deeper ocean environment. Those rocks are a little younger. They're closer to 85 million years old. This spot along the Niobrara River, the rock layers there are made up mostly of mud-sized pieces. They didn't form in the deepest parts of the ocean where limestone forms. They formed a little bit closer to shore, farther out to sea than the beach, but still in the zone where the mud-sized pieces can settle out. What we can say is we have different types of rock layers in Nebraska. Those rock layers are stacked up on top of one another. And because those different types of rocks formed in different types of environments, we can say that in this one place, Nebraska, the environment was changing. Sometimes sea level was high. Nebraska was in a deep ocean environment. Sometimes sea level was lower. Nebraska was a shallow ocean, or maybe even close to a beach. Geologists and paleontologists at the University of Nebraska study rock layers to know when those layers formed and in what type of environment they formed in. And there are a lot of other scientists all around the globe that study these things also. So we have a whole bunch of different clues from a bunch of different places that we can put together to try to paint a detailed picture of what the Earth looked like in its past. So if we jump back to the age of dinosaurs, this is what we think the Earth looked like. Here's North America. There's a shallow seaway covering what's now Nebraska. And sometimes that seaway extended all the way from the Arctic Ocean clear down to the Gulf of Mexico. Part of the reason for this ocean basin is that the Rocky Mountains were uplifting over here to the west of Nebraska, and that pushes down a basin nearby the mountain range. Now, but if we look at the rest of the globe, we can see that a lot of the continents were flooded by the oceans. Sea level was high during this time. We don't have any evidence of big ice sheets in places where we see them today, like in Antarctica here, or up north in Greenland. A lot of that water that's stored in glaciers today, 80 million years ago, those glaciers weren't there. That water was melted, it was in the ocean, and sea level was high. Let's dive in to this ocean in Nebraska. Let's take a look at some of the fossils that we find in Nebraska and see if they can tell us about the animals that lived in this ocean.